Hi, Elaine.
Hi.
So you are in London right now.
Yes.
Where are you from?
I am from Southern Indiana, just across the river from Louisville, Kentucky. And I pretty much grew up there as long as I can remember. That's where I was from. But it seems like a very long time ago now.
Yeah. How long have you been in London?
Over 20 years.
Hmm. Were
Mm.
you always a storyteller?
I was always a storyteller. In fact, my mother tells me that I learned to type sort of on my dad's like old clacky Smith Corona typewriter that he used in the 1960s at university when I was like 3 or 4 years old. So we have like papers where I like wrote stories out with like barely any punctuation or spaces or sense of paragraphs from a really, really early age. So I think I thought that's what I was going to do. In fact, I was pretty sure about that, but I got sidetracked a couple times along the way into psychology and into academia. I think it's only really recently, like decades later, that I've circled back to the
Hmm.
storytelling in a big way, you know?
Right. So when did you first tell a story, a personal story on stage?
I first told a personal story on stage actually a couple of years ago at Mortified, which is a storytelling project where it's all real stuff from your childhood. So it can be journals, but it could also be other stuff. We've had all sorts of things, whether people did like cartoon strips or whether they wrote plays or whatever. But I'd written this novel when I was 9 years old, and I'd had it bound in hard copy, hard and soft cover because my uncle had a print shop, and I'd like forced this on my friends at school for $2 a piece, and made the librarian stock it in the school library, and so it was a big thing. So I finally got to get up on stage in London and give More Than a Neighbor, that was its title, its full appreciation I felt it deserved. But then after that, I enjoyed the process so much of working with a producer that I became a producer for Mortified. And then I somehow kind of got involved. I realized just how much live storytelling there was in
Right.
London. It was quite a bit later that I did my first unscripted, because Mortified, you read directly from the artifacts,
Mm.
but things like the
Mm.
Moth or other storytelling, you don't. And I found that
Right.
really scary.
Yeah.
And since I'm a psychologist, and I think psychologists are a little bit used to kind of like keeping themselves a bit, like not necessarily broadcasting the personal stuff out in the world, that was a bit of a obstacle that I had to think about and decide whether I wanted to cross that boundary and whether I wanted to
Mm.
reveal myself in a
Right.
fuller way, knowing that I could be on a podcast or I could be on a video or somebody could be in the audience, and and somebody be like, oh my God, that's my therapist, this kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, definitely.
Because ordinarily your clients don't know very much about you. So if you
Hmm.
do real life storytelling on stage and then that kind of spreads out into the world, that, then becomes a
Yeah.
possibility. It was the same with
Hmm.
blogging. I had to make a decision about
Mm.
doing blogging and talking about personal things.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Mortified, can you talk to us a bit about that? So, is it London based, or is it
No, it started on the
right?
West Coast. A guy called Dave Nadelberg, God, about like a long time ago now. It must be nearly 2 decades ago. He was going through his old papers and stuff from when he was a teenager, and he discovered this really, really cringeworthy series of letters, I think, that he'd written to this girl that he liked. And he co-founded Mortified with somebody else, a guy called Neil Katcher, and it became this thing where there are chapters all around the world, and there's a show on Netflix about the Mortified guide, like grouped around particular themes, and it's got a podcast, a long-running podcast. And so all of the live on stage things are taped and then winged away to Mortified Central, where you might be able to get on the podcast. So I was really happy when my piece was one of the ones chosen to be on the podcast. And then again, yeah, it's just really weird, because then people, very occasionally, my clients in the consulting room would say, oh yeah, no, I saw, this blog post, or heard this podcast. And
Right.
I find that really, I still find that a little tough.
Mm.
Um, but I've decided that, yeah, I'm showing up with my whole self, and that's not what we're
Mm.
talking about in the consulting room. We're talking about, but yeah, showing my childhood self on Mortified. It's just, yeah, it's much more exposing than I'd ever thought that I would, something that I ever thought I'd do as a
Mm-hmm.
psychologist, as a therapist.
Yeah, it's exposing for anyone, but for your profession, like, yeah, it's even more
Yeah.
exposing for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. But, as long as when I'm in that room, in the consulting room, the work is about them, and I'm not somehow kind of
Right.
intruding on that space, then, that's just the work.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's great. I'm so glad you made that decision to cross that line.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's also important to model being vulnerable and being, not having shame or not having hiddenness and sort of really showing up authentically. I think that that's a direction that a lot of my psychotherapy clients are probably trying to go. And even if
Right.
I'm not using my personal examples with them in the consulting room, which I'm not, if I'm really living that, I'm a lot about practicing what I preach. And I think there is something really liberating and really like connecting to, I don't know, all of us being quite normal in our abnormalities or our weirdness, and
Yeah.
sort of sharing that with people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really want to help more of my clients do that kind of thing without shame in whatever kind of context. And I feel like if I'm living that, I can do a better job with that.
Right. So I want to go from storytelling to producing.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, like, what does it mean to produce Mortified?
So basically, as soon as I finished performing on Mortified, I said to the producers, the group of producers in London, I said, if you ever have a space for producers, I'd really like this, because actually the whole process of working together and finding the story or the narrative through and finding the kind of vulnerability and the story arc, that interview process that I had with my producer reminded me a lot of other things. I'd trained in journalism and I was also this therapist, so it kind of almost wove all the threads together. And I remember I was on a plane getting ready to travel back to the United States and visit my family, and I got a call from the main producer, and he said, it was right before Christmas, and he told me that they had an opening, and I was like, oh, I felt like I'd like won some kind of award, or like,
Yeah.
like I'd won some sort of, I don't know, pageant or something. I was really thrilled. And
Mm.
so I've produced a few pieces for Mortified. Now we're currently on hiatus because of coronavirus, but I'm still hoping that we might find a way to take the London chapter virtual. So, but I really enjoy producing, and somebody can give you a whole bunch of stuff, and there's so many different angles. There's so many, and I love being able to go through and like cherry pick out all of the really lovely bits, the juicy bits, and being able to string them together into a piece. It's really good fun.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I'm meeting you through this event.
Yeah, likewise,
um,
likewise. I'm
yeah.
really looking forward to it, because every storytelling project or event is a little bit different and so unique.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great to be able to work with people so internationally through the
Yeah.
virtual side of things. That's really nice.
Mm-hmm. So you'll be 6 storytellers this Sunday on May 10th for Bodies of Stories number 5. So there's actually 2 of you in London, even though none of you is actually from London. And then we'll have a storyteller in Oakland, 1 in Florida, 2 in Ontario, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So it'll be
Yeah, all the time zones.
great.
Fantastic. I'm really looking forward to it.
All right, great. I'll talk to you then.
Yeah, see you then. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.